Mac Power Users, episode 507, Ian Elsner and his Stick of Gum PC. Welcome back to the Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks, joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
Doing great, Stephen. We got a guest today. Welcome to the show, Ian Elsner.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Now, Ian and I have been talking for a while. Ian is a developer. He makes applications for museums using his Apple hardware. It's kind of interesting. Ian, tell us just a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I make those kiosk interactives that you see in museums. Everything from children's museums, from science museums to historical museums. And, it's not just a kiosk. Sometimes it could be something that's projected, or sometimes that it could be something that has a novel interface, like a Connect-based thing. But all in all, it's about teaching something, mostly to kids.
Well, Ian, every time I try to reach out to Ian, he is like in some other place in the world where he gets to spend months at a time at a museum, which I would think that is kind of awesome, to tell you the truth. So it's been really fun kind of coordinating with Ian over, I don't know, how long we've been working on this, Ian, about 6 months now. And we did nail him down, and he is going to tell us today about how he got into development, how he goes about making these kiosks and other museum exhibits. He's also a road warrior, of course, because of all this. We're going to be talking a little bit about his travel and other fun, interesting topics throughout the show. But I think, Ian, the starting place for every Mac Power user is you got to tell us about your gear.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm rocking, first things first, the Mac. I'm rocking a MacBook Pro 13-inch, which is great.
Now, Stephen, did that make you happy when he said first things first and then said the Mac?
I do appreciate that a lot. I thank you for that. What generation? You got a pretty recent one, or you got one with like ports and a good keyboard?
Yes. Who was it that said that Mac Power Users is kind of a support group for the keyboard?
Yeah, I think David said it, actually.
Well, it feels like every guest show starts out with a discussion of, does your keyboard still work? And sadly, too often it is no.
Well, mine is a 2017 13-inch, so it has the new keyboard and the 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. But I use it in clamshell mode with a external keyboard. So I'm happy to say that it's working just fine.
I was getting ready to ask you what you thought about the touch bar, but if that thing's in clamshell mode, you never see it.
Never, ever.
So it's great then. It's out of the way. It's not bothering you.
Yeah, and of course, the only thing I miss about it is the Touch ID.
Yeah. I really wish Apple would put that stuff on an external keyboard, but they just haven't happened yet.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Do you think security is the reason for that?
I've thought a lot about that, and I'm not an expert in how the secure enclave stuff works, but I could imagine a world where all that's in the keyboard, it'd be a very expensive keyboard, and then it just sends some sort of signal to the Mac to unlock. But I don't know. I even if it was USB, like I'd be fine with that. Like I mean, Ian, your MacBook Pro most of the time acts like a desktop. A lot of people have desktops. Like I'm fine plugging something in if it would give me that functionality.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was thinking about the problem as well. It's like, how do we do it? Because I look at this iMac every day, and I love the ability on the MacBook Pro to use your finger to authorize things. Mm-hmm. But okay, so let's say you did it with a secure enclave in the keyboard, and so it gets the fingerprint. At some point, it wirelessly has to send a thumbs up or thumbs down to the Mac. I mean, isn't that spoofable? I mean, I feel like it's got to be security.
Well, they already do it with the watch, right? So if you're at your iMac and you want to do Apple Pay, you can perform that on your watch, and Catalina unlocks a bunch of stuff with the watch.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I don't know why they haven't done it, but we're way off in the weeds now. But it makes me sad, is what I'm saying.
So you got keyboard number 1, Ian, because you never use it.
Yeah, okay. That works for me. And to your discussion, I do wonder, because the Bluetooth keyboards seem fine, and we're typing in sensitive information all the time
Right.
in the form of passwords.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm looking forward to a guest sometime in the near future says, "Oh yeah, I have the new keyboard. I'm still on keyboard number 1. I've been using it every day for 3 years." I'm looking forward to that guest.
Someday.
Yeah. Anyway, so you're using the MacBook Pro, and then what else? What other devices are you carrying?
Oh, my everyday is the iPhone SE, which is just perfect. Just perfect. Just absolutely perfect. I love it so much. And I've only ever had an iPhone with this form factor. I'm sure at some point I'm going to be wowed by the latest and greatest. But for now, the iPhone SE just makes me so happy every time I use it.
How is that on iOS 13? Is it still fast?
It is still fast, yeah. And again, I don't actually know what it's like to use an iPhone 11. Again, I fully expect my socks to be blown off when I finally get to it. And the camera is getting really long in the tooth. I'm really starting to envy those newer phones. But in terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis, I just love having it there. I just love that it's always with me, and we can get into some of the things I do with it.
Yeah, I understand the attraction. Now, have you always been like kind of enjoying the smaller size phone? Is that the reason you've stayed with it, or just it's working and why not just keep going?
Yeah, there is some satisfaction, I think, that both of you have talked about just running a piece of hardware into the ground.
Yeah.
And also, the new phones are expensive, and whenever I do get a new one, I'll be happy that the sticker shock won't be so bad because I haven't sort of kept up with every update.
Yeah.
And whatever upgrade that is, it'll be huge. It is true that the form factor helps. I think I'm really used to it, but in some ways it would be nice to have a larger screen. I think at the end of the day, though, it's just, as you can see, I'm surrounded by powerful devices, including my iPad Pro 11-inch. So I'm not really hankering for any more power in my phone.
I wonder if they're ever going to make one that small again.
Nope.
I doubt it.
I don't think so. I mean, the rumor now here in the fall of 2019 is that there will be another SE, but instead of that old form factor, it'll take on the shape and size of the iPhone 8, which is now sort of the classic iPhone size because it's been around so long. So I don't see that little phone ever making a comeback, unfortunately, which is a bummer. There are people who really like the size, but I think that the market has just moved on.
I could see it being cyclical at some point where they do go back to smaller sizes, but it would be a completely different design at that point.
Maybe the way to see if it's going to come true, the iPhone SE came out and, about that time, iOS got really flat, right? No more leather and linen and stuff. So if we start seeing leather and linen and green felt coming back into iOS, it's a sign that small phones are coming back.
Green felt is a harbinger of the small iPhone.
It sounds wild, but maybe time will prove me correct.
Well,
I love all these heuristics to try and figure out what Apple's up to.
That's right.
I mean, what is it? The criminology of Apple. I mean, that's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I do like the fact that you've got an older phone and you're perfectly happy with it. And that's something I do. I mean, I'm rooting for Apple. I'll be honest. I like Apple. And I'm not here to try and tear them down. But there aren't many companies making a device that old that people are still using, especially for a mobile device.
Yeah, and it really speaks to their quality of both software and hardware, that this thing still works.
Yeah.
It's still rock solid and
Right.
It still has the latest operating system. I think when it no longer supports the latest operating system, which I think might be iOS 14, I think that's when it's time for an upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you, man. I don't have that kind of staying power. I don't have that kind of self-control, unfortunately. It's like, oh, wait, they added one more lens? Oh, I need that.
I can't judge.
Yeah. No,
Can't
no,
wait.
You can't. You can't with your titanium Apple Watch.
I don't talk about that.
But I understand that you don't really use your phone a lot for the important work you do in the museum stuff, right? I mean, that's really just kind of your communication device.
Yeah, it's my communication device and my my Let's Play podcast and Let's Play audiobooks device.
Although I would say with all the travel you do, I mean, I have recently been taking a lot of pictures with this new iPhone, and the camera in this one is so much noticeably better than the one that's just a year old. You are really in for a treat when you do upgrade.
I can't wait. And again, the pictures are starting to look pretty bad.
I just took some portrait pictures of my little niece recently, and wow! I mean, I just because I have a big boy camera, but the iPhone, that portrait mode is getting a lot better, and the 1X mode with the new phone, where you can do it without having to step back 3 feet, makes all the difference. iPad, are you an iPad guy?
Yeah, I am. I've got the iPad Pro 11-inch. So this tells you I'm not shy about getting expensive Apple hardware.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this guy is great. This is my main travel computer and sort of the computer that I take almost anywhere that I expect to be working. So it's, obviously it's not something I take on a night out on the town, but pretty much everything else, I've got my iPad Pro stashed in a little bag somewhere, and yeah, and it honestly it does help keep the iPhone SE where it is, because I do have the latest and greatest hotness, and if I want to take a photo in portrait mode, look at that, I've got it on my iPad Pro.
And if you travel a lot, we're going to talk about travel later, but it is so much easier to use an iPad on an airplane than any laptop.
100%. And I think it's trending even more that way as airline seats get smaller.
Yeah, and frankly, the iPad gets more powerful. But we have something special in this episode. It's a very special episode of Mac Power Users, because Ian's not only telling us about his Mac hardware, he's going to talk about his Windows machine.
So yes, I'm glad you're welcoming this little Windows machine, and it is a little Windows machine. This is something called the Intel Compute Stick, and it is basically a dongle, but it has a full Windows computer inside of it. And gosh, it's so hard to explain. But in the theater of the mind, imagine an Amazon Fire TV stick, or a couple sticks of gum bolted together, and that's what this Windows machine looks like. And because I don't take my laptop when I travel, I just rely on that iPad Pro, which works really, really well 90% of the time. But occasionally I just need to compile something on an Intel processor or do something with an operating system that isn't iOS. And that's where this little stick of gum-sized computer comes to the rescue. And it's really something.
Now, explain how does that work? Don't you work with the iPad on that?
Absolutely. The way this works is with an app called Duet Display. This is kind of similar to the new Sidecar Catalina feature. Well, there's one main difference, and that one main difference is that it works with Windows. It works with a Windows computer. And so it's sort of a two-part app. One of it is the app that runs on your iOS device, and one of it is the app that runs on your Windows device. And it's also tethered. So you have to have a way to go from the Windows device to the iOS device. And so with the iPad, it's, a USB-C to USB-C or a USB-C to USB-A. I'm sorry. For the iPad Pro, it's something that goes from USB-C to USB-A or USB-C, depending on what your Windows computer looks like. And then it basically allows Windows to be another app on your iPad, which is really, really fun.
Yeah, I'd like to get into the details of that just a little bit more, though, because you've got a stick of gum-sized PC that you're now driving from your iPad.
Yeah.
So how exactly are you connecting? What are you connecting the stick of gum to?
So I'm connecting the stick of gum to two things. One of them is power,
Okay.
and it's powered by a USB-C port. And the other is the iPad. And so the iPad sees it as another computer, and on the latest versions of iOS, it'll say, "Oh, you've plugged into a computer. Do you trust this device?" And I say, "Well, yes, I do trust this device." And then I open Duet Display, and there is my Windows.
Yeah. So there's no monitor connected to your stick of gum, right?
That's correct.
That's what got you on this show. When you told me that, I'm like, we have got to talk to this guy. Isn't that like tickle all your nerdy bones, Stephen? Just
Yeah, I'm putting a picture of it in the show notes. I mean, it's pretty wild because what you've effectively done is you've got an iPad that is an external display for like a headless PC all in one. And like you said, traveling, every device, every pound counts. So you have made the most of what you can do. It's pretty wild. In fact, when I saw this picture in the show notes, I was confused. I was like, well, it's running Windows, but that's definitely an iPad and not a Surface device. And I couldn't quite work out what was happening until I read the description underneath it in the show notes. I was like, oh, that's very clever. Very clever indeed.
And Stephen, it kind of reminds me of the, for some reason, when I first did this, it reminded me of the Apollo-Soyuz program, which I knew you'd appreciate.
I do appreciate that.
Because there's these two design languages. In the case of Apollo-Soyuz, it was this American design and this Soviet design, and yet they're sort of docked together in space. And I'm sure you know all the nerdery about how how to make a dock that would fit both spacecraft. It's kind of similar to sort of bring these two worlds together. Mm-hmm. And I admit it's not always clean, but there are certain issues which I'm happy to get into. The way I look at it is this: a lot of people say, "Well, why don't you just bring a MacBook or a MacBook Pro along with you? Because that's a machine that can run both Windows and Mac." The way I look at it is that what's so great about the iPad is just being able to pull it out of your bag and start using it, and that's 90%. 90% of the things I need to do on it are just in iOS itself. It's only that last 10%, it's only that occasional use that I actually need to sort of do this plugging in and plug it into a power source, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that actually sort of, so it's a little more annoying, but it's only a little more annoying for that last 10%.
And there's so many listeners that like work in a Windows environment, and usually they've got some kind of business app. It's not like you're running a high-end graphics card game on this. This is not a machine made for that. But
it's very low powered. Yes.
Exactly. But for a lot of the stuff people use to make a living, this is fine. And it allows you to work off an iPad, but also drive that one Windows app you need in order to, pay for your shoes.
And so here's a tip for anyone who's doing this. Even though the iPad Pro works as a monitor and actually even as a touch screen, because Windows supports touch screens natively, so you can actually just touch the screen with your Apple Pencil and move files around that way. I like to have my mouse, my little portable mouse that I bring along, paired via Bluetooth directly to the stick so that there's absolutely no lag. So it's as if that iPad is just a monitor. My keyboard, my external keyboard, is Bluetooth paired to my iPad, and that routes all of that when you have the Duet Display open to the Windows machine. So it's really nice because the Spotlight search still works even when you're in the Windows machine. It'll just throw you back out to iOS, which again boggles, like, I was so happy when it first worked.
I guess you have to do a good bit of like context switching mentally, because you're kind of in both OSs at once.
Exactly. But it is kind of nice to be able to put Windows in a slide overview and have the rest of your machine sort of in the native iOS style.
So you seem to move pretty fluidly between Windows and iOS and macOS. I assume that forces some decisions about the type of software you use every day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I was platform agnostic since before I should have even known what that term meant. Like in middle school, my father would occasionally bring home an ancient Linux machine from his university. And, he knew I loved to tinker with this sort of thing. And I would spend all day sort of installing various Linux distributions on these ancient, Pentium 1 beige boxes. I mean, this was peak beige box. And it was to the point where, like, looking back, I don't even know what I was doing or why I was doing it. Because I would spend days trying to get a system up. I would say, oh, I wonder if I can install Ubuntu on this machine. It would take 2 or 3 days, and then I'd finally get it working. And then I'd spend 5 minutes rearranging the desktop icons and then think, I wonder if I can install Red Hat Linux on this, and then just completely blow it up and start over from scratch. And that's why I didn't get anything done in high school.
Yeah, but that's what gave you the imagination to come up with this awesome idea.
It really does make me appreciate sort of not being tied to any one system.
So what next are you going to run on your iPad?
Boy, I would really love to be able to natively develop something on the iPad, to natively compile something on the iPad. I don't know when that's coming. I don't know if that's part of the long-term plan. But what I do know is that if Apple gives an inch, we'll take a mile.
Yeah, and they know that too.
Yes, they do.
I wonder if this new Swift, initiative is heading that direction. I mean, it seems to me like it's inevitable at some point you're going to be able to develop on an iPad. I mean, they're so powerful. Now they match the speed and exceed the speed of some MacBook Pros. So why not?
Yeah, I hope that's the case.
I was talking to somebody once that said they thought that the problem was just the number of assets it takes to develop. All of the digital assets to have a development environment are pretty excessive, and that the iPad isn't really good at that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting theory. I think that very well could be the case. Whatever solution ends up happening, I really feel like it will open up the world of programming to a lot more people than it currently is. In the same way that, iOS itself opened up a whole world of computing to people who weren't exactly comfortable with a keyboard and mouse.
I think you're probably right. Have either one of you played with that, Swift Playgrounds application?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, me neither. I think I downloaded it when it first came out, but I didn't really get very far into it, honestly.
I've gone pretty far into it, and it's really fun. I look at it like a game because it's like a puzzle. You've got to write code to solve a little problem, and the further down the stack you go, the harder it gets. And I would recommend it to someone. I don't think it's preparing me to be the next great programmer, but it does give me a little taste, and it's accessible to anyone. I know they made it for kids, I think, but for this, middle-aged nerd, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's a really good recommendation. I should check that out.
We've talked about running Windows on your iOS device, but how do you look at the bounce? Like I was interested when you told me that even though you have the MacBook Pro, it doesn't travel with you, and I know you spend a lot of time on the road.
Yeah, I think this is just part of my travel philosophy, which is really like, don't bring as few things as possible, because it always is, to me at least, it's always easier to carry less stuff. I think one nice thing about the world that we live in is that it's possible to get to computers remotely from wherever you are. And, there's all sorts of remote access solutions out there. But the one thing that I've been really loving in just the past few months is Chrome Remote Desktop. Chrome Remote Desktop used to be a browser extension that worked Chrome and nothing else. You know, it was one of those Chrome apps.
Yeah.
But these days, it just works in the browser, which is mind-blowing to me that they're able to put this fully featured remote access suite right inside the browser. And I'm kind of pleasantly surprised because Chrome is not my sort of day-to-day browser, and I really only keep it around for this purpose. But I've now actually used it in various museums to be able to access their computers from remotely just because it's that reliable.
And now you're accessing it from Chrome on iPad or on the plugged-in Windows machine?
It is on. I can access it from a web browser on a desktop computer.
Sure.
In iOS, it still uses an app.
Okay. But so I guess this is remote access from your home MacBook Pro then.
Yeah, or when I'm on the road to my home MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
And so again, if there's just that one little thing that I need to do, it sort of makes me feel better about not having a laptop with me.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password, the simple solution for safe and secure passwords. Head over to 1password.com/MPU in all caps to get 20% off your subscription. It's iOS update season, and of course, 1Password is all over it. The new version of 1Password has a bunch of new features just for iOS 13, including dark mode. When you're looking at your screen late at night or maybe right after you wake up, you don't want to be blasted in the face by a bright screen. With 1Password's dark mode, you can see all of your passwords with a nice dark screen. They've even added a special dark app icon that looks right at home on the dock on your phone. If you listened to our iOS 13 show, you know that one of my favorite new features is voice control, and 1Password makes full use of it. The new feature opens up a world of possibilities for users who may not have the ability to interact with their iOS device using their hands. Well, with voice control and 1Password, you don't have to lift a finger to search, open, edit, or share items from within 1Password. You can control every aspect of your iOS device, including opening and navigating 1Password, just by using some simple, predictable voice commands. The new version also has additional document support. For a while, you've been able to create documents in 1Password using the camera roll. Starting with 1Password 7.4, you can create documents from the camera roll or use the camera directly, or even pick a file from the Files app. That means you can bring in files from any application that makes its files available to the Files app, like Dropbox, Google Drive, and the rest. They've also added the ability to use the document scanner in iOS 13 to create PDFs from your paperwork. So if you want to drop something into your 1Password vault, all you have to do is point your phone at it. If you've already installed iOS 13, now's the time to get the latest version of 1Password running on your iPhone and iPad. And if you haven't tried 1Password yet, you should. It's a great application that makes it super easy to have safe and secure passwords and also store so much more information behind a separate security vault on your mobile devices. Head over to 1password.com/MPU in all caps, and you'll even get 20% off. Thanks 1Password for all of your support of the Mac Power Users. So Ian, one of the things that's interesting and something a lot of our listeners are interested in is that you're a self-taught programmer.
I think maybe a lot of your listeners are sort of in a similar situation, that all of this tweaking and all of this sort of general interest in the computers eventually leads you to figuring out how it all works under the hood.
Yeah. So how did you get started?
Back in the day, and this is around when I was in college, which incidentally, David, is when I first started listening to you and Katie Floyd on this show.
Awesome.
Yeah, congratulations on a decade.
Yeah, crazy. I know. Well,
yeah, it really is.
What really makes me a little sad is when they're like, "Oh yeah, I used to listen to you in middle school, and now I work for Apple," and I'm like, "I'm old."
No, I do not say that to make you feel old. But yeah, so I went into a graduate program, and it was basically something that focused on video game design, which was kind of the closest to what I wanted to do. It was kind of a digital arts and science program. But I wasn't really interested in the video games themselves. I wasn't really into making the video games or making the assets for the video games. What I was interested in was the literature that I was exposed to, the sort of literature about game design theory and, in particular, educational design theory. And my professors were really good at sort of talking to me about this. And one professor brought in a designer at a local museum to talk about museum design and educational apps at the museum. And boy, I was hooked. It just seemed like the coolest thing to me to take all the strategies that we use in video games, that we employ in video games, and actually teach people something about the world using those same techniques.
I am such a museum junkie. When I visit any city, I want to go to the biggest museums they have. And not only do I want to look at the displays, I just want to be there. I don't know, I can't really explain why, but just sitting in a museum cafeteria to me is a pleasant experience. So I'm very jealous of you because so when you go out and do these gigs, you spend months at a time at them, right?
Yeah, only very few are that long, and usually, I come back home between weeks working out there. But would it be okay if I told you about my first one?
Yeah, please tell us.
When this museum designer came in to talk to our classes, I started thinking, well, okay, this will be a perfect thing to do for my classes, is to try and make a museum interactive. The people at the museum said that they needed a new exhibit on how birds flew to sort of teach kids, it's not just like an up and down flapping motion. It's more of a, as if you were swimming the butterfly motion. It's kind of a forward and back. And so I started connecting some of those Microsoft Kinects, which are the controlling devices for Xbox games, and making little avatars of birds and creating, like, sort of turning that into a game. And the game was, could you fly like a bird? And if you did it correctly, your bird avatar would take off. And if you did it incorrectly, your bird avatar would stay on the ground. And it was because of this game design focus that I was really able to turn it more into a game. Okay, there needs to be an objective. Maybe the bird has hungry chicks in her nest, so it's really important that you learn how to fly to feed them, or that sort of thing. Or tapping into people's natural competitive nature and sort of make you have a bird avatar, but also make your friend have a bird avatar and see which of you can figure it out first. And it was a great enough museum, and it was sort of a small enough museum that they basically just let me come in with my plywooded together interactive and plop it down in the lobby and start putting it in front of visitors.
I bet that felt pretty good the first time you saw some kids flying in front of your...
I was absolutely hooked, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
So can you describe some of the additional types of work you're doing now?
Yeah. So a large part of what I do is exactly that still, and it's in a much more professional, controlled context. I work with a whole team of wonderful people who not only help us develop the content for what we're doing, but also provide the assets to actually make it look nice, unlike what I could do, which is literally, plywood taped together. And so that's sort of a big part of what I do. But another thing that I do sort of that dovetails nicely is just being a general museum technologist, because the museums themselves aren't necessarily tech savvy as a whole. Certainly, plenty of them have actually really, really good in-house support staff and in-house IT technicians. But usually the process of actually installing one of these kiosks takes a lot of there's a lot of things that have to go into it, because the museum may have just set up internet once and then no one's ever thought of it again. And so it requires that's usually what takes the longest in one of these installs. And, lots of museums do it differently.
And so when you're on site doing programming, is it that iPad plus PC stick combo that you're doing the work?
Yes, exactly. On the iPad, I use an iOS Git client called Working Copy.
Sure.
I'm able to edit my code and commit changes to it. But here's the thing that I've sort of learned that makes it easier to keep the laptop at home is don't procrastinate. When you're on site, make sure that your work is done, more or less. Don't rely on being able to just save it to the last minute when you're actually in the field to program it. And so it's also a little bit of discipline that even if I can certainly make tweaks, I can certainly change a few things, but there's no tolerance for like rewriting the app from scratch on my iPad because that just wouldn't work.
Sure. So you've done the hard work, and then you show up with the light technology to tweak it and get it, fine tune it.
It's a process of making sure that everything is configured correctly. A lot of these modern museum interactives are exhibits that tie in with other parts of the gallery. So you might be making a poster on one station, and then that poster is sent to a giant wall across the room so that you can see your work or other people can see your work in public, that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of networking that goes into it, and a lot of things I've learned about the way these computers work. Almost all of these museums use Windows as what runs the kiosks. And so there's all sorts of Windows settings that I never knew about as a Linux head that I'm now very, very familiar with.
All right, give us one more story. You had to have something go horribly wrong at some point.
So this is not just something that happens once. It's the Windows updates. Windows is very, very aggressive about updating itself, which I think is ultimately a good thing because of the security risks. Yeah. The problem is that it really ruins a visitor's day to see the computer go, sorry, Windows is installing updates. And it's even worse when this happens in, the enormous screens in the lobby or these enormous projections on one side of the exhibit walls. It's basically a pseudoscience of trying to figure out in what ways can you disable Windows updates. One of the ways that I love doing, my favorite thing to do, is just don't let Windows get on the internet.
Okay.
So basically make an air gap. And of course, this works with many museums, but increasingly museums are like, oh, but we want visitors to be able to email what they did in the museum to themselves. And so we're developing systems that require that block certain addresses that sort of have a double hop, so that all of the exhibit computers are connected to one computer, which is connected to the outside world. Another thing that you can do, which is probably the easiest for anybody who has a Windows machine in their life, is to take whatever internet that is the main network, go into the Microsoft settings, go into the Microsoft internet settings, and set that connection as what's called a metered connection. And this is basically so that Windows it's a feature that's designed so that Windows doesn't ruin all your tethered data by downloading an enormous update. But basically it tells the computer that don't try to update on this network. And it's not a complete 1-0 switch. If Windows really doesn't have any way to update, it will still manage to find a way to update through that network, but it really, really helps.
Yeah. I wonder if we're heading that way on the Mac. I mean, with all these security buttons we're pushing now, is that going to be the next thing, Stephen? We're going to have an update every week?
I mean, they've had like 2 supplemental updates to Catalina already, but I don't think it's quite that bad.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely trying to go for a different model. They don't want to do it every week, I'm sure.
So, Ian, you're writing basically Windows applications. It sounds like what tools are you using there? What language are you working in? Or are these web-based? Or are they running right on top of Windows itself?
These are Unity-based applications, and Unity is a giant IDE for doing game programming. And what's nice about Unity is that it's you can target for specific platforms, and it makes it very easy to just hit a button and say, export what I've just written to Windows machine. I use C#, and what I do even on the Mac is I use Microsoft Visual Studio, which is actually a really good environment for doing code, and it works nicely with Unity.
Yeah, getting back to your game programming roots from school.
Yeah, what we find is that these interactives are pretty robust, and as sort of we're asked to do more 3D stuff and more intricate, complicated things because our visitors are used to video games, we find that that's a really good way to sort of keep up with the times.
And also because there's so much money being made on video games that those engines are constantly getting tuned and improved. So you don't have to do the underlying technology of it. You can just, ride on the coattail of that.
Exactly. All of that optimization we sort of get for free.
And you program it from an iPad connected to a little piece of plastic. I love that. I love that.
So much fun.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Text Expander, a tool that lets you unlock your productivity. If you're on the iPad or the iPhone, you'll be glad to know Text Expander supports iOS 13, dark mode, and more, so you can have your snippets with you in your pocket or your bag wherever you go. And with Text Expander for Teams, you can unify your organization's voice with shared snippets. So you may have different groups within your organization that need to send out similarly formatted content, whether it's help desk emails or public communication. Text Expander lets that become less repetitive and more uniform because everyone is using the shared snippets controlled by you. And you can make everything you write this useful with things like text documents, spreadsheets, web forms, and more ready to go. Anywhere you can type, Text Expander will be there to help. And you can turn your snippets into forms with fill-in and pop-up fields, optional text blocks, auto-filled dates and times, which I use all the time, graphics, and more. Text Expander is available on macOS, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more, and you'll get 20% off your first year. While you're at textexpander.com, check out some of their recent blog posts about making things like invoicing easier, and this really great post I enjoyed about wellness at work, so you can work more effectively and feel great while you're doing it. So go to textexpander.com/podcast. Listeners of this show will get 20% off their first year. Our thanks to Text Expander for sponsoring MPU. So, Ian, we spoke a lot about how you're on the road using this iPad, Windows, compute stick, Frankenstein together, but you are carrying an iPhone, you are carrying an iPad that sometimes isn't a display for a portable PC. Are there some apps that you have found that make traveling easier to deal with?
Yeah. I think the first thing, and maybe the most important thing when you travel, is to make sure that you don't ruin your sleep routine. And I use an app called Pzizz, that's Pzizz, and it's this is an app that I've been using since I've been listening to Mac Power Users.
Yeah, we covered this a long time ago. This app's been around a long time.
Yeah, I wonder if you were the one who introduced it to me.
I think, didn't it start on the Mac? I think it started on the Mac, but maybe not.
It may have, but it's got a great iOS app. You can set a sleep session, which is basically just, I'm going to sleep now, and I want you to wake me up when I set my alarm for. You plug in some headphones to your phone, and then you listen to this really, really nice sleepscape. And the app does a good job of, I believe you can use a large part of it without having to pay for it, but I think that the paid version is very much worth the upgrade. And another nice thing is that it does naps, which are sort of a different, because obviously sleeping is different from napping. It has a really good sort of different feeling. And I don't know if it's the app is training me or I have now become so accustomed to those noises that it's actually a really good thing to trick my brain into saying, oh, it's time for a nap. So if I'm on a plane and I want to get some shut-eye, the first few notes of that sleepscape is usually enough to put me to sleep.
I haven't used the app in years, but I remember at one point I had an extended trial in the LA Superior Court, and I would go, because we'd have these long breaks in the afternoon, I would go into the parking structure and hook up Pizzazz to my earphones and just take a nap in my car with it. It was great for that. And it drops you in and it pulls you out, and then I'd be refreshed and ready to go make objections.
Your Honor. Yeah.
Thank you, Pizzazz.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Similarly, I've really enjoyed a new app called Dark Noise, and this is just it has all of the colors of noise that you could ever want: white, gray, pink, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not exactly sure what those details mean, but what it does is it can also give you these nice soundscapes. So, things like a forest walk or a campfire or a rainy day or a cafe or something like that. And it really can help you, I think, even when you're traveling, even when you're on a plane or on a bus or an environment that you're not familiar with, to sort of just have something in the background. And what I like about the app, too, is that it goes underneath whatever audio you're playing on your iOS device. Not all apps do that. Some require you to only have one audio playing at any given time. But I found it's really nice to sort of be in a different environment. And I tend to choose the environments that are exactly opposite the environments that I'm in right now. So if I'm on a plane, I choose sitting at a campfire. Or if I'm in a cafe that's really noisy, I choose sitting on a crowded train. And it's just a little bit of a mind trick to sort of keep me focused.
And also, I'd add that Dark Noise is one of the most automation-friendly apps in this category. So if you want to make, shortcuts, turn that on when you walk into Starbucks and connect to their Wi-Fi or whatever, it can do all that stuff. So it's really great if you want to automate some of this.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's excellent.
Yeah, they make donations straight into shortcuts, so you can very easily automate Dark Noise.
I've checked it out. I use one called White Noise because it will let you blend two sounds together. So actually looking while I was muted, and I use brown noise plus rain. I like the combination of those, and hopefully the Dark Noise developer adds a feature like that. It would make me happy because the UI in White Noise is really bad, but Dark Noise, the app you're talking about, it is very clean and it looks great. It's got a really nice dark mode, lots of custom app icons that will remind you of some particular podcast that I may or may not help make, but it's a great app, and they've come a long way with it already.
What else do you use when you travel?
I really like to get as much as I can out of my local library. There's this whole wonderful suite of apps where all you have to do to use them is input your library card number, and then you have access to all of this content for free. One of my favorites is called Libby. I believe this is the same company behind Overdrive, which is an app that did something similar, but if you haven't checked it out in a while, or if you haven't used Overdrive in a while because the app is a little janky, let's be honest, Libby is the answer to that. Libby is really clean, really nice, and it allows you to rent books and audiobooks from your local library using your library card. And just like a local library, you might have to wait to borrow something out. You might have to wait to check it out. And if it takes you longer than 2 weeks to read a book, you might have to ask for a hold or an extension on your rental. But I found it to be a really, really good, inexpensive way to keep up with all of my books without going to a more expensive solution like Audible.
Now, do you do that on your iPhone?
I do that on my iPhone, yeah. So I have a whole library of stuff, and every time somebody recommends a book to me, I have my list in drafts, and then once a week I go in and search for all of that in Libby and go ahead and get on the waiting list for those. And 6 weeks later, what do you know it, I've got that book. It's really fantastic.
Not instant gratification, but a lot cheaper.
It's kind of the iPhone SE of audiobooks.
How do you feel about reading on the iPad? I know a lot of people prefer the Kindle because it's got the front lighting and e-ink is maybe easier on the eyes. Does that bother you?
For whatever reason, I don't usually read with my eyes. I'm usually just reading with my ears through audiobooks.
Okay.
And of course, I do read articles and stuff on my iPad. But for whatever reason, for books, both nonfiction and fiction, I just prefer to have it through my ears. So so that saves me having to pack a Kindle as well.
I'm weird that way. For fiction, for me, is almost always in my ears, and nonfiction is almost always with my eyes. A lot of the nonfiction, I want to go back and highlight something, or
Fascinating.
I want it as a reference. But for a good yarn, give it to me over Audible. I'll take it every day. I don't know, Stephen, are you a big ebook reader?
Yeah, I've got the Kindle Oasis, the current one, and I read a fair amount on it, but I don't really care for audiobooks, which is weird because I make and listen to a lot of podcasts, but audiobooks have never clicked for me for whatever reason. And I'm a really fast reader. That may be a part of it. That I can read something way faster than I can listen to it. But I read anything long form basically solely on the Kindle.
Yeah, I think that's why I like fiction as audio, because I want to force myself to just kind of enjoy the story. With nonfiction, I will jump around, but with fiction, you got to just kind of hear the story play. Are you a fiction reader? I don't, I've never talked about this.
Yeah, some.
Right.
Mostly nonfiction, though.
Yeah.
My fiction is pretty, space adventures or, sort of science-based science fiction stuff.
Yeah. Well, you should try one as an Audible, sometime a fiction book, and just see if that works for you.
What's nice about fiction reading through your ears is that one of the things that I remember most clearly is like where I was walking around the woods or something when I learned about a revelation about Severus Snape in Harry Potter. Yeah. Like those things stick with me, and they're kind of more tied to the landscape. It's a really interesting way to go through the world, listening to various books.
And you mentioned Harry Potter. The narrator of the American versions was Jim Dale. And
Jim Dale,
that guy, listening to him is wrapping yourself in a warm blanket. The way he narrates the stories, the books almost don't compare when you try to read the books in the way compared to the way he narrates them.
I 100% agree. He is the canonical voice of all of my favorite characters.
And we're going to be hearing from our British listeners because I forget who it was that did the British version, but
Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
I think it was Stephen Fry.
I have never heard them, but it's hard for me. I know he's great, but Jim Dale is my man.
There are other apps that you can use your library card with. One I like is Canoply, which is kind of, it's a little Netflix-like. It doesn't work exactly in the same way, and I find it a little befuddling at times. But basically, it's a documentary streaming service, and then as being self-taught, in programming and many other things, makes me have really warm feelings for things like Linda's app. And I think more and more libraries are offering access to things like Linda's app or other online course apps. And so I would just check out what your local library offers and see if you can't start a new routine using your iOS devices to learn something every day using that library card. Of course, you could always go to a museum.
Yes, you could.
You can do both.
What's one of your favorite museums that you've worked on?
Oh, man.
I know you got to pick one. That's no fun.
Yeah. One of my favorites is the new Infinity Science Center in Pearlington, Mississippi. It's Stephen, you'd like it because it has the lower stage of a Saturn V rocket just sort of sitting outside the building.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's not like it is in Huntsville or in Cape Canaveral or in Houston. And so many nights I've just been out there with this enormous lowest stage of the Saturn V rocket on a trailer, just like watching it get more and more moldy in the southern Mississippi sun.
There's a reason those are indoors most of the time, but
I know. But no, that was a really fun museum to do because this is a region of the country that was directly affected by Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
And so one of the interactives that we did was teaching kids how hurricanes work. And we were able to do it in sort of a game-like fashion. And I think it turned out to be a really successful, very quick way of teaching something that is really complex. And I feel like there's a little, in the museum world, there's a little bit of criticism about putting too many screens, which I think is a very fair criticism. If we have screens in our pockets, why do we need to see them in museums as well? But in certain cases, like the many, many factors that go into how a hurricane forms, the high and low pressure systems, the sea surface temperature, all of that stuff, having an interactive that creates this whole world that children can manipulate actually might be the best way to tell that story and to teach that concept.
Well, and to your point, there's some things that can just come to life with something like animation or interaction that may allow it to click for more types of learners, even than if it's just, static imagery that you're reading or viewing.
Yeah, 100%. And there's all sorts of techniques that museums will do to sort of get through to the kids, because you're right. We find in studies that most of the time a big wall of text is never going to be effective for a kid or even an adult.
Yeah.
But instead, we like to think of it as like adults like to sound smart. So we like to answer the questions that any kid might have at that particular moment in the text that's at the height of what an adult might be able to read. So the kid is like, "Oh, why is this the case?" You as the parent can be like, and then you look around and you see the answer right in front of you, and then you can sound smart in front of whoever you're with.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Linode, high-performance SSD Linux servers for all of your infrastructure needs. Use promo code MPU2019 to get a $20 credit. With Linode, you can instantly deploy and manage an SSD server on the Linode cloud, and you can get a server running in just seconds with your choice of Linux distro, resources, and node location. Linode serves their customers with the help of 10 data centers across the globe, and they're about to add more. Mumbai, India, and Toronto, Canada will both have data centers before 2020. Linode features native SSD storage, a 40-gigabyte network, and Intel E5 processors, meaning you're able to serve your customers even faster than before. And so you don't have to stress out about overspending. Linode has designed their pricing tiers to feature hourly billing, with the added bonus of monthly caps on all plans and add-on services such as backups and node balancers. Plus, they feature two-factor authentication to keep you and all your data safe and secure. Linode has pricing options to suit everyone. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for just $5 a month, and they offer high memory plans starting with 16 gigabytes of RAM. And Linode has a special offer for you. As a listener of this show, you can go to linode.com/MPU and use the promo code MPU2019 to get $20 toward any Linode plan. At that basic plan I was talking about earlier, that's 4 months of free Linode. And with a 7-day money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose. Give Linode a try today. That's Linode, linode.com/MPU and promo code MPU2019 to learn more. Sign up and make the most of that $20 credit. Our thanks to Linode for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
So, Ian, you're traveling around, you're developing stuff, you're putting things together, but you also find time to host a podcast.
Yeah, and this is a podcast that sort of balances out what I do and looks at museums in a more critical eye. The podcast is called Museum Archipelago, and I really like to think of it as sort of a critique of the museum landscape by sort of looking at, each episode usually focuses on a specific museum from anywhere in the world. And more often than not, I'm actually there in the museum talking to someone at the museum, either the director or a staff member or someone who cleans the museum or really anyone, and sort of talking about how this museum fits into the wider, I call it a landscape of museums.
Is it just you doing these interviews, or do you work with a co-host? What's that workflow look like?
No, it's just me. And that's one of the reasons why I keep each show to 15 minutes. And that really helps me with the edit and with the interviews, because it's really all I can do. But I feel like also better for the listeners, because they get sort of a heavily edited, very focused look into the museum world. I feel like museums, even though they have sort of tremendous cultural power, and a lot of people, like you, David, really, enjoy the feeling of being in a museum. One thing that I found is that there aren't really that many outlets critiquing museums. It's a little bit incongruous with what I do. So much of my day job is, this is the truth that is being presented. But I find it sort of works both ways. It really sort of, my job makes me have sort of an insight into what's actually going on behind the scenes at the museum, which I can then share with my audience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's interesting, first of all, it's a great podcast. I would recommend it. I was listening to it this morning.
Oh, thank you.
But but you talked earlier, when you go on the road, you don't have a MacBook and a bunch of MacBook-like recording gear with you, but you still record these shows on the road. So you are a rare breed. You are an iPad podcaster.
I like being an iPad podcaster because this is another thing that I was self-taught at. And whenever I learned it, I just learned to do it on an iPad around the time that the Apple Pencil came out. And so it was just this perfect mix of, oh, well, I'll learn something new and I'll do it with an Apple Pencil. And when I look at other people editing with a keyboard and mouse, I think, wow, they look like they're really doing it quickly, but I feel like I'm just as fast with that iPad and pencil. Another bonus is I get to edit podcasts on a plane, which is much easier to do with just a little tablet.
Yeah, it's not great on a 15-inch MacBook Pro, I can tell you.
Have you ever, Stephen? Have you ever edited a podcast lying face up on the couch?
No, that's tricky with a MacBook Pro. You really could hurt yourself.
You could suspend it. I could see a way this would work.
Build some sort of rig.
Yeah, exactly.
First, you'd have to, have the rig. Then you'd have to weld your MacBook Pro to the rig. Mm-hmm. But we could make it work.
Yeah.
But it is becoming more of a thing now to do not just podcasts, but any kind of, decent audio is very possible now, not only to record it with the iPad, but also to edit it. Could you talk to your workflow for us?
Yeah. So the recording workflow, I have two microphones. One is sort of my tiny microphone that I keep with me everywhere, which is called the Shure MV88, but it plugs into a Lightning port.
Okay.
And it has really good audio. Shure has its own iOS app. And because I always have my phone with me, in a pinch, I can always, or if I go into a museum and, when I'm not expecting to, as happens sometimes, I know I always have this ability to record. But just recently, as I'm sort of upgrading and trying to improve the podcast, I got the Zoom H4n Pro Handy Recorder, it's called. And so this doesn't really jive with my desire to bring less stuff with me, but it's so good and the audio is so much better that it does have a special place in my bag now.
So do you just hold the Zoom up, or do you connect a microphone to it?
If I'm on the road, I have a portable little GorillaPod stand that I mount it on and just use it not plugged into a microphone. But if I'm in my recording studio, then I can use the Zoom and plug in an XLR cable with a microphone directly into it, and it'll record, and it'll present itself as a USB interface to a Mac.
Now, I have the original generation Zoom H4. The new one, I think, is better. As I understand, it has even interchangeable heads. But the version I have has basically bolted onto it 2 microphones that intersect each other. And if you look at it in an X-ray, it looks remarkably like a taser. And over the years of carrying that to Macworld and WWC, I've got so much love from our friends at TSA that they love that every time I pack that. It got so bad that I now when I carry it, I literally put it in its own bin and just run it through.
You're anticipating their response.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it does get the audio that you need.
Yeah.
And then because it records to an SD card on the road, usually on the bus back from an interview, I just go ahead and plug in that SD card to the USB-C port using one of those
the camera connection
using one
kit.
of those camera connection kit. I put it on my iPad and then have it sync with Dropbox.
Yeah.
And then I just know that now that I have multiple copies of that file, and next time I have some time to edit, I can go ahead and start right away.
I actually think that that's wise. I mean, I understand the sex appeal of having the microphone plugged directly into your iOS device, but, iOS audio doesn't necessarily mean you have to do the capture on the device. And having a dedicated recorder can make a lot of sense, because that one in particular, like, you can plug it into a board. I mean, it just has so much more flexibility for someone who's trying to do good audio on the road. I think you made the wise choice buying it.
And there's another reason too that I found really useful. It's that if my phone or my iPad is my microphone, then I can't take notes or look at my premeditated questions, because I can't touch the microphone when I'm using it.
Yeah.
That'll be really unpleasant for my listeners. So having that as a separate thing, and then holding the iPad in and going through my premeditated questions, I found to be a good solution.
As the resident audio nerd, Stephen, your thoughts on the Zoom and the portable recorders like this?
Oh, it's great. I mean, I've got the big brother of this and have used it a bunch of different places. And what's cool is that it's got the built-in microphones, or you can run your own into it. Like you said, the flexibility is really outstanding for the price and the size. And you can run it on batteries, or you can run it off USB. Like, it can do whatever you need it to do. And if you're going to buy a piece of equipment like this, the more flexible it is, the more likely it is that you can use it in the first place. So I think it's a great choice for someone who wants to do field recording like this. If you're in a studio like we are all the time, you don't need something like this. But if you're out on the road in a bunch of different environments, something like this can make your life a lot easier.
I got an email recently from a listener who was going to take recordings of his mother. He wanted to go talk to his mother about her childhood and all the things I wish I had done with my mother. And he was asking, well, what's a good way to do this? And I said, well, you could record it on your phone. I mean, the iPhone does a pretty good job recording if you just hold it up to her. But I recommended to him the Zoom H1, which is even less expensive. It's like $100. And it's fine. Just get a big enough memory stick for it that you can record for a while. Although I think the microphones in the H4 are far superior.
Stephen, what did you say was the big brother of this?
They have the H6.
Sorry, David.
It's the H6, and it's more inputs is basically the big difference. So
okay,
it's got 4 XLR in, and then the top modules you can change out from an XY microphone to I've got a shotgun for mine, or you can plug in a thing to have even more XLR channels in.
Now, is that the one where you can record to the SD stick, but also pass the audio through to another device?
No, the Zooms don't do that. So I've actually kind of retired my Zoom for most of our live stuff, and I've moved off to the Mix Pre 6, which will let me record to SD and USB at the same time. Because we live stream our stuff, we need that output.
Ooh, that would be really nice. I'll be able to find that in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put the Mix Pre in there. I'll put the Mix Pre 3 in there. It's the smaller one. The only difference is the 6 has more inputs.
That's really good. Ooh boy, I shouldn't have just bought this one.
That's what happened. This show, I mean, last week we did iOS accessories. This week we're talking about audio gear. It happens, you know?
I was getting emails and text messages from listener friends within that were within the first 5 minutes of last show saying, "What have you done to me? What have you done to me?"
But you know, there's a bunch of ways to skin the cat when it comes to recording.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way or right or wrong equipment. As long as it meets your needs, then you're fine.
But I want to talk about the edit as well because, and I know not everybody's making a podcast, but there's lots of people who have a good use for good audio. And Ian is also doing the edit on iPad. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I use this excellent iOS app called Ferrite. And what Ferrite does is it's really promiscuous about the audio that it takes in. You can even record directly from Ferrite if you happen to be recording from your phone or your iPad. And what it'll do is it'll connect with the Files app, it'll connect with your Dropbox, and you can just download any of those files and start making your show or your edits or putting together the audio of a family member, I think is another excellent use case for this.
Let the record show it took 10 years, but we got a promiscuous app on the Mac Power users.
Yeah.
Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Now I feel self-conscious. No, but the Ferrite also allows you to template your show. So in my case, my intro, again, the show is only 15 minutes long. So you can imagine how long my intro can be if I have a lot of museum content to get to. But it's still nice to have that all templated, and all I have to do is just instantiate that template into a particular file. You can also add MP3 chapters for it. You can do all sorts of mixing and leveling for it. But even if it's just a piece of audio of a family member, I recommend giving it a try because you actually might find it really, 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 really convenient and intuitive to start clipping out someone's cough or rewording something slightly. You can see the WAV file right there. All you have to do is just tap on it to rearrange it or to make a splice edit or something like that. And again, because you can do it lying face up on the couch, it really fits with the way my mind works. It's a great app.
I know so many people that swear by how powerful Ferrite is. I have it installed. I haven't really played with it. I think I need to do a project in the application to kind of appreciate it.
I know Jason over at Six Colors and the Comparable, he really likes it. He's used it a lot and has talked about it a lot. And I've tried it and I like it. I prefer editing with a keyboard and mouse and a big screen. But if or hopefully when Ferrite comes to the Mac, I could move to it because I don't use most of what Logic has. Honestly, it is really, really good.
I feel like Ferrite is a fantastic candidate for that Catalyst style app. It really feels powerful, but also that power gets out of the way. And there's no reason why it couldn't be a great Mac app.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Kensington, the people who make universal docking stations designed to increase your productivity because it gives you access to more ports, making your sleek MacBook, Chromebook, or other laptop as powerful as a desktop. It's plug and play with no drivers, so you can enjoy up to dual 4K displays with HDMI and DisplayLink video connectors, plus USB 3, USB-C, Thunderbolt 3 with power delivery available. The Kensington engineering team has 3 decades of experience with this stuff in high-volume manufacturing of hardware IT products, plus rigorous test cycles and quality control mean all of their products are tested above industry standards. If you're an IT decision maker looking to find the right docking solution for your organization, check out Kensington's Pro Concierge program to test drive a docking solution today. Visit kensington.com/Mac right now to check it out. That's kensington.com/Mac to learn more. Our thanks to Kensington for their support of this show and Relay FM.
So, Ian, with all your travel and all the work you do, let us know some of the apps that delight you. What are the things you use that help you get your work done?
Drafts for iOS is great. I think that's another app that I learned about on this show or in the wider community. But now that it's available on the Mac, I'm loving it even more. It's sort of my go-to for all of my lists, all of the books I want to read, all of the movies that people recommend to me, all of the ideas for shows. And it's so nice to have it synced everywhere. It's so nice just not to think about it. And it's so nice that it's available on both of these platforms. It's probably the thing that's made me happiest about my Mac setup in the past few months.
I mean, so often when I'm in the day job and I get on the phone with somebody, my fingers just hit Command-Shift-2, open a new draft every time I can write notes down, and it's just so fast to get in. But it sounds to me like you are using it to store notes as well as collect text.
Yeah, I kind of use the archive feature a lot so that my sort of whatever is in my main inbox view is pretty small, but I can always go back and search through my archive if I need something.
Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, on this is a fun. I have a couple of fun shortcuts on iOS that I use all the time. My mom really, really loves it when I text her that I've safely landed, even if I'm on a connecting flight. She likes knowing that I've safely landed in the connection, which is great. It's but the thing was, I ran into this problem of forgetting to do it. So I decided to tie it.
Sure.
Using the iOS shortcuts, I decided to tie it to turning off airplane mode. So instead of going to turn off airplane mode in the settings app, I have a little shortcut that I tap. It's one of the invisible ones on my home screen, and it turns off airplane mode for me. It fills in it asks me which city I just landed in, and it composes a text to my mom saying, I just landed in city name, and then a couple of hearts, a random number of hearts.
Oh, that's a nice touch.
Thank you. She was on to me pretty quickly. So then that I was doing it in an automated fashion. And so I then mixed up the number of hearts so that...
I can see that.
Yeah. Love you, Mom.
Well, one of the things you said there was it's one of your invisible shortcuts. And we'll share your home screen. We'll put it in the show notes and in the newsletter. You fully embrace the shortcuts desktop life.
Yeah, I fully embrace the shortcuts desktop life. And some of it is that my phone, I don't use my phone for that much.
Yeah.
And in many ways it is a machine for listening to podcasts and listening to audiobooks and for starting Pazziz sessions.
Yeah.
And that allows me to use these sort of multi-app shortcuts or just single app shortcuts, but sort of tying it to a specific thing. So one of my most used ones, it's the target on my home screen, just starts playing Castro podcasts wherever I left off in my queue. And
nice.
And it's just great because I don't know what I did yesterday. I don't know if I finished the day listening to a book or listening to a podcast or listening to a song. All I have to do is hit that button and I'm right back into a podcast. It just starts playing and I can put the phone back in my pocket and continue walking through.
And then you're using the magic trick of having shortcut. You've got a black background on your screen. So listeners, you can picture he's got a black background, but he's got icons that are just black icons for what we'll call hidden shortcuts. So if you touch a section of your screen, you're actually triggering a shortcut without seeing an icon. but it's just a black icon to match the black background. Any other secret shortcuts launching with those black icons?
Yeah, one of those is the one that turns off airplane mode and texts my mom.
Okay.
One of them.
I'd be worried on that one that I would accidentally tap it when I'm not traveling and mom would get the message and then she'd totally be on to me.
Yeah, she would totally be on to me. Well, the good news is it asks you which city you just landed in.
Okay.
It doesn't try to figure that out automatically.
Yeah.
Which would be a fun way to spend an afternoon to sort of make shortcuts do that.
It's not that hard. It's just get location, and then with the magic variable, you can get the city. The only problem would be it might not have the right city as soon as you pull it out of airplane mode. It might take a minute or two.
Right, because the radios are just getting
Warmed up. Yeah.
getting warmed up. Exactly. But no, I have stuff like enable low power mode, which is that needs to happen surprisingly often when you use an iPhone SE from 4 years ago.
Yeah, I bet.
So just having that there really, really helps.
You have to email me when you get the newer iPhone, Ian. I want to hear about it.
I'm going to be like, this is amazing. Yeah. Why didn't you tell me?
Exactly.
I haven't gotten a chance to talk about my favorite U.S. portable battery.
Yeah, sure.
A few weeks ago, I got a Zendura Super Tank, which is this insane battery. Also, kind of goes against packing lightly. It basically, from the pictures, it basically looks like a carry-on roller bag.
It looks like a pelican.
Yeah, it does. It kind of has this like strong plastic shell around it, and it is pretty big. But the thing is, it will charge my iPhone SE for over a week, which is just insane. You know, it really.
Yeah.
I really like it, and another thing that I really like is it has 2 USB-C ports and 2 USB-A ports. So I'm also using it as a hub where whenever I go into a hotel room or something like that, the USB-C wall charger that I use is called the MU1 International, and it's teeny tiny. It's 45 watts, which is enough for anything as long as I don't bring my MacBook Pro. And I plug that directly into the Super Tank, and then I have these 3 extra ports with pass-through charging that I can...
Sure, so you've got power going in through one USB-C, and you got power going out through the remaining ports.
Precisely. And so I can charge all my devices, or if I need to turn on my Intel compute stick just from that battery tank.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could see you doing that. Just plug the compute stick into the Monster battery.
Yeah, it does give you gives you some looks at the Starbucks.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I mean, it is because they've got it next to a MacBook on the website, and it is not a small battery.
It is not a small battery, but it is kind of the one battery to rule them all. You know.
Is this your only external battery? So, like when you're going down the street, is this thing in your pocket at all times?
No. I keep this in my bag. I'm afraid. I'm afraid there's no room.
I think you could probably kill a man with this too. So that'd be an extra benefit.
Features and benefits.
Yeah, if you got in trouble, just pull this out and throw it at him as hard as you can, and then run.
Yeah, don't worry about my taser shaped microphone. Worry about my
your battery. That's nice though. We just did the show on iOS apps, and the biggest one we recommended was like 2/3 of the power of this one.
Yeah, I didn't search for brick sized batteries.
Yeah, and it's structurally sound too. You could use it as a load bearing wall or anything. Yeah,
you open a can of beans with it. If you get really hungry.
Yeah, it's really something.
Yeah, the other thing you were telling me on the phone was about your love of noise canceling headphones.
Yeah, and that's another thing that comes directly from the travel. I think like a lot of people, I found the Sony WH-1000X M3. These are great names.
Yeah, I know.
But it is sort of that over the ear style.
Yeah.
And it is really nice. It really turns off the rest of the world. Or if you're using an app like white noise or dark noise, it turns it into a cafe or a tranquil hike or something like that. But what I'm really interested in, and I kind of feel like it's a trend that's going on, is noise canceling coming to smaller, non-over-the-ear style headphones.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have heard of this rumor of the new Pro AirPods?
Yeah, the rumor says they could do noise canceling there. The new Pixel Buds, which will be out next year from Google, they're going to have it. Samsung's got a set of earbuds with it. So I'm fine with that as long as it stays optional. I actually don't like active noise canceling, but I know it is extremely popular, especially for people who fly a lot, where you can drown out the plane a lot easier.
I really like the AirPods in the sense that you can hear the rest of the world while you wear them. The only time I use noise canceling headphones is really on an airplane. But man, I hate packing them because like Ian, I want to take as little as possible. And every time I look in my bag and I've got these massive cans in there, it just breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's yes. I hear you. Like it's a death sentence to wear these kinds of things walking around in the city. It's just awful. It's just, you just can't hear anything that wants to hit you. But even in non-plane situations, like even a noisy open plan office, these kinds of noise canceling, or dare I say, a museum on a day when the school groups are coming through.
Oh yeah,
noise canceling is very much your friend. But I agree with you about the packing. I think these non-over-the-ear noise canceling buds, they don't have to be as effective as these Sonys to be what I prefer to use, because if it's 80% of what it offers, but it's much, much, much smaller, then I'm sold.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens. I wouldn't be surprised if that rumor turns into reality at some point, but I want to read the reviews before I buy in. But even if I got a pair of them, I don't think I'd be using them every day. Well, Ian, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. I love that you are driving a PC with your iPad. I think that's a first for the Mac Power users.
Hello.
And I'm going to continue to email you because every time I feel, like I'm in a rut, I just want to email Ian and find out where he is and what amazing thing he's making in a museum. It's just, it's great hearing your story. So thanks so much for coming on. We'll probably have you back on some point when you get the new phone so we can, I think what we have to do is do a live recording when he unboxes it. And
there you go.
And he takes his first picture or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to be floored.
Or just even the boot up. I would imagine it even boots up faster. It's just been so long since I used a phone of that generation. I don't even know what it would feel like.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. I'm so thrilled with what both of you do, and you guys are always coming through my headphones and
your noise canceling headphones.
My noise canceling headphones, yeah. You're always there, and so it's really, really a treat to talk to you both.
Well, we're glad we can bring you some serenity on middle school day in the museum. Whatever it takes, man.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Where can folks find your podcast at?
My podcast is called Museum Archipelago, and it's at museumarchipelago.com. And the links to Apple Podcast and Overcast are in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll get all that in the show notes for you.
You can also find me at my website, ianelsner.com. And my Twitter is museum_go.
Excellent. And we are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. This is episode 507. Thank you to our sponsors, 1Password, Smile, Linode, and Kensington. And we will see you all next week.